Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Batista. I'm a wellness program manager with Buckeye Wellness in the Office of the Chief Wellness Officer, and I'm here to welcome you to our monthly Lunch and Learn program. I'm so excited to have Alison Barney with us today, who's going to be talking to us about best practices for physical activity and how to implement them. Just as a brief overview, our Lunch and Learn program is a monthly program that we hold every single month. Our next month's feature is going to be mis and disinformation and sifting through what are the differences between those terms and how do you identify evidence-based information. So feel free to check us out. That is the last Friday of the month in August from 12 to 1 p.m. Let's see, the official date on that one is August 26th. So we hope to see you there. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Alison Barney. And before I do that, I just want to say we are going to ask for your feedback based on this program at the end through a Qualtrics survey. So please fill out that Qualtrics survey when you get the opportunity to do so. All right, great. So I'm here to introduce best practices for physical activity and how to implement them in your life by Alison Barney. And Alison is a graduate of The Ohio State University with a master's degree in exercise physiology and holds a health and wellness coaching certificate through Well Coaches. Alison worked several years in cardiopulmonary rehabilitation at the Ohio State Western Medical Center. She is passionate about helping the Ohio State community reach their health and wellness goals. And she likes staying active by running outdoors and spending time with her husband and her 2 young children. She also enjoys watching college sports, especially OSU football, and reading in her spare time. So everyone, please give Alison a brief round of applause. And I'll turn it over to you to take it away, Alison.
All right. Thanks so much, Lauren. Thanks to Lauren. Thanks for having me for the Lunch and Learn with Buckeye Wellness here. And also thanks to all of you for taking some time out of your day to join us to talk about physical activity. So what we hope to kind of cover in today's session here is we're going to review the importance and benefits of physical activity. We'll discuss some of the current recommendations that are out there for being physically active. And then we'll also go through some just basic concepts of building an exercise program and things to think about as you consider how that's going to fit into your life. And then we will finish up by talking about common barriers to physical activity adherence and hopefully come up with several different ideas and brainstorming some different solutions to help you keep going here. So the benefits of exercise, of course, have been really well established. We know that exercise plays a pivotal role in our weight management, as well as can reduce the risk of illness and chronic conditions. In addition, weight-bearing exercise can help to strengthen our bones and our muscles as we age. And being physically active can help also improve posture, balance, and just keep us strong enough to be able to do activities of daily living and complete those daily tasks that we need to. Additionally, there is evidence that even as little as 20 minutes of physical activity can help suppress inflammation in our body and support immunity. So there's actually a lot more benefits even than what's up on your screen today, but those are some of the highlights of the physical things we can sort of expect with exercise. Outside of those physical benefits, exercise can help us to increase and manage our mental and emotional well-being. In fact, mental benefits of aerobic exercise have a neurochemical basis. Exercise reduces levels of the body's stress hormones, such as adrenaline and cortisol. And it also stimulates the production of endorphins. So those are our kind of body's natural painkillers and our mood elevators. And endorphins are responsible for that runner's high, if you've heard about that before, or basically feelings of relaxation and optimism. And behavioral factors also contribute to the emotional benefits of exercise, including often a sense of mastery, accomplishment, and control, as well as pride and self-confidence. In fact, exercise is so important that studies have demonstrated that low fitness levels, in some cases, are a stronger predictor of risk for adverse cardiovascular outcomes than sometimes even traditional risk factors, including lipid abnormalities, hypertension or high blood pressure, insulin resistance, obesity, and even smoking. So the figure here shows all-cause death rates across low, moderate, and high levels of cardiorespiratory fitness. Several meta-analyses confirmed that the greatest mortality benefits occur when progressing from the least fit to the next least fit group here, or a low level of cardiorespiratory fitness to moderate fitness levels. And across all these different studies, 13 and 15% reductions in cardiovascular all-cause mortality were observed with just one MET of increase in exercise capacity, or the body's ability to do work and uptake oxygen more efficiently. So in basic terms here, the more physically fit we are, the lower risk we have for cardiovascular events, and then as well all-cause mortality. So it's really an important factor here. It's also not all about cardiorespiratory fitness, though. As you may know, a lot of risk versus benefit can also be associated with our sedentary time. Most of us are aware of this risk, but I'm always still surprised kind of each time I hear some of these different statistics around our movement habits. In fact, one study estimated that American adults now spend an average of about 9.5 to 12 hours a day sitting. And research has demonstrated that sitting for extended periods of time is linked with things like obesity, type 2 diabetes, and an increased risk of death from heart disease and different cancers. So excessive sitting may also be linked to kind of slow metabolism, which can have an impact on the body's ability to do things like regulate our blood pressure and blood sugar, as well as break down body fat. In fact, the World Health Organization reports that 3.2 million deaths can be attributed to the lack of physical activity. So injecting kind of physical activity into our day can reduce some of those health risks that are elevated by being sedentary. What is interesting, though, is that even if we exercise regularly, it is quite possible that we may not be getting enough daily movement to help kind of counteract those harmful effects of sitting too much, according to different research, even in this area. For the most part, the information on the previous few slides is not new information for us. The challenge when it comes to exercise really seems to be what, how long, and the how, right? What exercise is right for me? How do I do it? How do I even get started with this? And then if you have gotten started, how do I keep it going? And that's hopefully what we'll try to also discuss here today. So you might be at a starting point here where you're just trying to move more and sit less, and that is okay. Solely focusing on steps and changing our movement patterns can help us lead a more active lifestyle, right? And lessen that sedentary time and therefore hopefully our risk. So a research team from the NIH and the CDC looked at kind of the association between our step counts, the intensity of that movement or stepping, and then our risk of death. What they noticed here in terms of step counts was compared to the people who took about 4,000 steps per day, those who took around 8,000 at the start of this study had a 50% lower risk of dying from really any cause during the follow-up period. And people who took 12,000 steps per day had a 65% lower risk of dying than those who only took 4,000. So there's a lot of evidence, right, that just increasing our daily movement and our step counts can have a big impact on our risk. Higher step counts were really seen, and this effect was seen really across the board here, consistent across age, sex, race, all the groups really. The intensity is another interesting part that they saw that didn't really have the impact necessarily on risk of mortality once they kind of considered the total steps there. So when it comes to even lessening our sedentary time, there's not a lot of research yet that kind of gives us that guideline necessarily of what we should be doing here. But one researcher suggests that for about every 30 consecutive minutes of sitting, we want to stand up and move around for at least 5 minutes to sort of break up that sedentary time. So you can also factor potentially that guideline a little bit into maybe what you're working on in terms of activity with steps. So the ideas to increase movement and activity, might seem simplistic, but they really kind of do add up here to our overall kind of daily patterns. If you are doing any of these on the slide here and you're still looking for some additional activities, you should be able to access the link for an article for more ideas from ACE Fitness with the presentation materials that Lauren sent out today. And remember that our activity trackers are designed to help us create activity and stay accountable for movement. So use those trackers or other devices and notifications to help monitor your movement and then also prompt you to increase. While we're talking about steps here a little bit, it is really easy to fall into the trap of feeling like you have to get that 10,000 steps per day, which, we hear is kind of that gold standard a little bit in terms of our general movement. However, if you're in that lower part of your step range right now, maybe 4,000, 5,000, it's going to be really hard and maybe not sustainable right now to go almost double of what you're doing. So take it in small steps. Maybe set a goal to increase your activity or step counts by even an extra 500 or 1,000 steps each week or couple of weeks. So keep that in mind too, if that's something that you're trying to work on. When it comes to exercise, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services came out with our recommendations. These are the second edition of physical activity guidelines for Americans. And these recommendations, of course, just to review, state that all adults, we should get a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week for overall health. And in fact, this can actually even increase to 300 minutes per week to see further outcomes here. If you are engaging in vigorous exercise, this number can kind of change a little bit to 75 minutes of vigorous exercise a week, up to like 150. And then the other part of the recommendation that you don't hear as much about is that we also should be getting at least 2 or more days of muscle strengthening activity of moderate or greater intensity that involves all of our major muscle groups here. So we don't want to forget about that one. By the early 1990s, data was kind of mounting on the dose response of physical activity with health outcomes. So these findings are reinforced even today here by a lot of recent investigations that demonstrated our health benefits of physical activity are obtained even with small amounts of moderate intensity activity. So while maybe improvements in fitness require a little bit more strenuous or continuous activity on a regular basis, health benefits such as improved lipid levels, reduction of blood pressure, weight management, cardiovascular risk profiles, they can be seen through just accumulating moderate intensity activity throughout the day. It is now understood that activity does not have to be taken in a single bout to be beneficial. And that's really great news for us. Because for instance here, right, benefits from 3 10-minute walks versus one 30-minute walk are very similar here. So we can really use that to our advantage. And then also more recently here too, the American College of Sports Medicine stated through their analysis of research that bouts of even less than 10 minutes of duration can still produce those health outcomes. So really any bout, any duration can have positive impacts on us. And then regular exercise too, with that recommendation, it really includes a wide range of activities, anything from sometimes like gardening and taking the stairs to more traditional exercise like aerobic dance or running. And they don't have to be strenuous, again, for us to see those benefits there. So no matter how you kind of choose to break down that recommendation, part of getting started and creating your exercise plan can include what we refer to as the FIT principle. So with the FIT principle, you want to consider your frequency or how often you're going to perform exercise, the intensity or how hard you will exercise, and then how long you plan to do the exercise for, and then of course, what you plan to do, the type of exercise. So those principles come into play as you're kind of designing your own exercise program with what you want to work on, what you want to see, and we kind of match those, of course, with the recommendations, or we try to work up toward those recommendations. So there are several types of exercise, and really, of course, each type of exercise can provide you with different benefits to your health. And ideally, a well-rounded exercise program will include those different types in some capacity. However, to keep in mind, if you're just starting out here, you may just want to focus on one particular type or components of this here to prevent feeling kind of overwhelmed. So just to kind of review here, when we talk about cardio exercise, or sometimes it's referred to as aerobic exercise, it's really any kind of physical activity that raises our heart rate above its normal range. And then also in there as well, uses a lot of our large muscle groups for movement and activity. Strength training or resistance training is really any kind of resistance training that involves, pushing, pulling, moving the body against external force here. So it could be our own body weight as resistance, machines, dumbbells, resistance bands. There's a lot of different things that we can use to provide that kind of force on the muscles there. And then flexibility and neuromotor exercises as well. Of course, these are exercises that stretch our muscles in order to help improve our range of motion, functional training in terms of balance and coordination as well. So finding exercise that you enjoy is actually probably one of the most important ways to actually adhere and stay consistent. So think sort of realistically where you are starting from here. And this kind of pyramid, there's a lot on this slide, but this pyramid can kind of help you think about that maybe a little bit from where your starting point is. If you rarely do physical activity, your starting point could be more from that base of the pyramid. Just thinking about every day, how do I do more movement, more everyday activities? We could say even measure it right by that step counter if you have that. If you sometimes do physical activity, you might want to see, right, if you can build that consistency up here and really try to start honing in on those recommendations. So pick things from the middle of that pyramid there, where you're either doing some aerobic exercise, 3 to 5 days per week, or you're working on muscle building exercises or activities 2 to 3 days per week there. If you often engage in physical activity, this sometimes can be one of the most tricky parts here, because you're going to want to try to keep things interesting or add variety in there, maybe create new goals or new challenges to keep yourself motivated and excited and stay consistent. There always seems to be a lot of confusion surrounding kind of what really constitutes moderate or vigorous intensity. It seems like that's a question that I get quite often here. And there's really several ways to measure or gauge exercise intensity. And really the easiest way for most individuals here is to either use a relative scale or the talk test. So with a relative scale here, it's all about rating your perceived exertion. And you may have heard that before, or you may have been somewhere that they have asked you these questions using something called an RPE chart, or rating of perceived exertion. But basically, if you rate your effort or exertion a 5 or 6 out of 10 on a 0 to 10 scale here, of how difficult something feels to you, more often than not, you're going to fall within that kind of moderate intensity range. Rating your exertion about a 7 to 8 out of 10, would be probably more in that vigorous category. And a good, in the moment check during exercise or activity is to do that talk test. So really, if you can find that you can comfortably talk, kind of carry on a very light conversation, but you could not sing, that means that you're in that moderate intensity level. So a good kind of principle of thought here, if you're just getting started, is start slow and or start low and go slow. So choose lower intensity activities and gradually increase, how often you do them or how long you do them. Sometimes starting out too hard in an exercise program is one of the main reasons why people sort of loathe or disdain physical activity, because it doesn't feel good then. Maybe during or even afterwards, right? We're kind of feeling maybe more sore or uncomfortable, and that's no fun. So start low and go slow. So when people do exercise above that kind of respiratory threshold, or the point where it's really difficult to speak or talk, often they postpone exercise's most immediate kind of mood boosts here. And a lot of times that's what really fuels us for wanting to do the activity again, when we find a lot of enjoyment and positive emotion out of the exercise we're doing. So again, using the FIT principle with strength training, there's several things to consider when you're planning out your resistance routine. As you're choosing kind of how many strength exercises you want to do, you probably want to consider the amount of time that you're able to commit, and then certainly your current fitness level, kind of where you're starting out with. This will help you kind of decide what your lifting split looks like. And you may be wondering, what is a lifting split? Really, this is, in other words, how you split up kind of your training plan with parts of the body that you plan to work. So it could be a full body routine, meaning you're kind of working all the different major muscle groups of your body in one session. It could be splitting up, just doing exercises for your upper body and then a session for your lower body. Or it could even be splitting up specific muscle groups. Maybe your biceps and your triceps, or your chest and your back, and really doing multiple exercises to work those specific muscle groups. If you're just starting out and you plan on trying to kind of start and incorporate some strength training, and work towards that recommendation of the 2 days per week, probably the easiest way to start is just planning for a full body routine where you do, maybe even just 1 to 2 exercises with all of your major muscle groups. But again, you can manipulate that depending on where you're starting from, and then your comfort level and your knowledge as well. You can also think about, again, what kind of mode you want to use for exercise for resistance training. So again, there's lots of different options. You don't have to be in a gym or a wellness facility to be able to do resistance training exercise. A lot of things can be done even at home, like using your own body weight. Those resistance bands or TheraBands are very easy and pretty cost effective. So many people use those. Then even items around the house can be used too. A stack of books, water bottles for weights, milk jugs or laundry detergent jugs. Those are all things that you can use as well to do some strength training. So our recommendation, right, tells us to include this resistance exercise around 2 days per week. But again, you might even consider, once you get going, to do around 3 to 6 days per week. And really that's to just really challenge the muscles to see some of those different outcomes of muscle building. So when we talk about muscle building, that really actually even can just mean maintaining our muscle mass as we age. Physically inactive people, we can lose about 3 to 5% of our muscle mass each decade after age 30. So we're even talking here about incorporating this, not to get big and bulky. We're talking about it to maintain healthy muscles here. So really even 3 to 6 days per week could be beneficial for that. And then somewhere around like maybe a maximum of like 4 sets, doing 8 to 12 repetitions for your exercises can be recommended. And then doing those with a weight or resistance that you feel fatigued kind of during the last few reps, but you still are able to use and keep proper form there. And then just like aerobic exercise, if you are just starting out, it is okay to start with, 1 to 2 sets of some resistance exercises and then kind of progress from there. We want to do it in a really realistic way so that you want to keep up with the exercise. And then another concept that you might want to factor into your exercise plan that really, isn't a part of that fit principle, but is important, is the warm up and a cool down. So really, these are really important, again, for adherence, because that's going to help you feel better with your activity and tolerate it better. Warming up, what we're talking about here is just increasing kind of our intensity level of activity for about 5 to 10 minutes before our session. This could be marching around. This could be taking a light walk. If you're doing even some resistance exercise, warming up is beneficial. This could be doing a lighter weight or using your own body weight. Maybe you do 10 body weight squats before you do your dumbbell squat. So just kind of readying the body here for activity. It helps increase our body temperature, increase our heart rate, our blood pressure, and it really preps our muscles for getting ready to do activity and exercise, decreases that likelihood of injury, and it helps just increase your range of motion and muscle elasticity. On the other end, when you're finished with exercise, cooling down is something that you don't want to forget as well. This really allows your body's physiological systems to kind of return back to those pre-exercise levels here. So it brings the heart rate and blood pressure back down, helps cool the body down back to normal temperatures here. And importantly as well is it helps clear that lactic acid from our muscles. So if you've ever felt that like burn in your muscles, that's a lactic acid buildup. But as we move here after we exercise at a slower pace, that helps that clear that out from the muscles and aids in a little bit easier and faster recovery. It also prevents blood from pooling down in our kind of lower extremities. So if you stop exercise abruptly, maybe without a cool down, because that muscle contraction doesn't help and aid that blood flow getting back up to the heart and the brain, you could get lightheaded or dizzy. So really it's all about kind of keeping you safe, but it's also about helping you feel well too with exercise. So don't forget those warm up and cool downs. So especially for those of you who maybe are not exercising at all here or just getting started, maybe you have a lot of barriers to physical activity or exercise, or maybe you just don't like exercise, and that's okay. Your first steps though into the plan should be safe steps here. So we're talking about small steps. Plan the first steps, the goals, the routines to be smaller than you think they should be. Take whatever your first thought is of doing physical activity or exercise, and then try to even scale it back a few degrees. Because psychologically, it's going to feel a lot better to add activity or go above what you anticipate doing versus missing your target. So start with small steps. Next, make sure everything is accessible, right? Do you have what you need for these first steps? That might be the first launch into this, is to make sure you have what you need. Maybe something in your environment to accommodate what you're planning. Gather the equipment that you might need to make things more comfortable or more safe. Or look for, support or routines. If you don't have access to a fitness facility, find the things that you can do for little or no cost, or ready your home for exercise, or find places in your local community that you can be active in. Definitely make sure that it is fun. We talked about earlier that really positive emotion is rewarding. So you're going to be more likely to want to do your activity if it's something that you enjoy, and you will be naturally kind of more consistent here with your goals. So maybe you should run to increase your heart rate for your overall health. But if you hate running, do not set an action plan to run. Maybe start with walking till you kind of get a base of endurance or activity, or you like something like dancing. So you could start with something like that. So it's really whatever you find kind of personally enjoyable. And then you can always work up to the thing that you feel like you should be doing over time here. And then we want to make sure it is easy or familiar, right? Could be our other thing here. So perceived failure is definitely discouraging. So our tendency is to really set those expectations high for ourselves. And then it's really easy to kind of have that internal voice beat ourselves up if we don't hit that target. So that really is kind of that pitfall or trap here. So we want to make things, especially exercise, feel really easy and accessible here. So once you have started an exercise routine, really, as we alluded to before, the next challenge is like, how and when do we progress, or how do we keep it going? One thing to keep in mind along the way is that typically it's advised that we add or change something about our exercise routine about every 4 to 6 weeks. And that could be as simple as maybe an order that you do, the type of activity that you do, the intensity that you do it, a little bit extra time. The reason for that is that many of the body's physiological systems kind of adapt to exercise within approximately around that 6-week mark here. So if you don't modify your exercise routine, eventually you're going to kind of reach a plateau with that, because your body is really adapted to that sort of repetitive training stimulus. Also, of course, barriers have a way of challenging us and throwing us out of our routines and habits that we have created here. So planning ahead, anticipating barriers so that you can really deploy solutions to help you build some resilience in your goals. So the next half of our presentation is going to be just to kind of bring up and talk about some of these common barriers to physical activity, and then brainstorm a little bit of solutions surrounding those. And then finally, knowing your reasons for exercise and reminding yourself of your motivations can help you stay engaged over the long haul as well. With those in mind, it's really important that you try to celebrate or even reward yourself for your actions that you've taken, as well as the outcomes that you achieve. Keep in mind that sometimes desired outcomes from being active and exercising, such as weight loss, or changes to like things like our lipids or our blood pressure, they can take time to happen. So recognizing wins and sort of immediate benefits tied to activity is one of the best ways to sort of fuel that motivation and keep our habits going and create those habits. So even kind of before, I guess, really the pandemic, the last 2 years, adults in general, and there's a lot of research to support this, we're spending a lot of time at work. And what we kind of heard with health coaching is during the pandemic, things shifted a lot for us, right, in terms of time. Maybe we weren't stepping away from work as often because it was also in our home environment. There's increased demands in general of the job have caused us to be sitting more, moving less. Technology in the same, right, has left us inactive. And then just time seems to be kind of always that barrier for many of us, and can be a large barrier. So think about, how are you going to make time for activity, or what has helped in the past if your time has been limited for you to stay physically active. If time seems to be a barrier for you, you might want to think about what could be changed, swapped, or even given up, so that you can allow for activity into your schedule. So here are some more making time solutions. If this is a barrier for you, tracking in general or keeping like an activity log can help you stay accountable to see sort of where you're spending your minutes. We often hear a lot too in health coaching that scheduling time and protecting it for your exercise can be a helpful approach. You could think about even like front loading your weekend or your week with your exercise plan. If you know that later in the week you have errands to run, or the weekend is filled with social gatherings, could you get your sessions in earlier in the week when you have more time? Another approach to keep in mind is, again, that we can split that exercise up into multiple sessions. So use that to your advantage if you're crunched for time. HIIT training or high intensity interval training is another way to be a little bit time effective here, because you can get a lot of bang for your buck out of higher intensity sessions. You don't have to do it for as long a duration here, even as evidenced by our recommendations there that change with vigorous exercise. So you could consider that. Also, kind of have that backup plan. You know, we can't plan for everything. So when something pops up during your original exercise time or plan, you know, what's your plan B? Where do you go from there? This is an exercise time fighter that we created with the OSU Health Plan, and it is attached as well on today's documents. So you can print that out and use that if that's something that would be helpful for you. Oftentimes, if you're a visual person, this can help you see kind of where pockets of time lie for activity and help you in that planning period. Of course, you can use your own schedule too, if that works for you, but something like this, just kind of fill in your normal daily week work, after work activities, if you have to run kids to practice or something like that, or you have additional committees or community events. Put everything on there that you normally do, and then that can help you visibly maybe see where you have time for activity to kind of block that off there. To use our time wisely, as well as reduce that sedentary time, a lot of people have actually adopted this idea of exercise snacking. I love this idea. Exercise snacking is kind of built from the ideas or concepts of HIIT training. So again, with traditional HIIT training, you alter your higher intensity periods of exercise with lower active recovery, you know, for a duration of, 30 plus minutes. Exercise snacking kind of takes on those similar concepts, but instead of higher intensity short bouts of exercise, it's just spread out right throughout the day. You're snacking on these higher intensity bouts. So for example, here, in some of the studies that have looked at exercise snacking and how it impacts our health, there was one study that it was a small sample size that had about 11 overweight men and women, and they had them sit in recliners for like 9 hours a day, where they worked and they watched television, and they had all their meals in the chairs. So one day the people never left the chairs except to use the restroom. And then on the other day, they left the chair just to race up the stairs. I think 3 flights of stairs once an hour. And that took them about 20 seconds here. And what they saw was that overweight participants that added that 20-second burst of stair climbing to their otherwise kind of very sedentary day had improvements in their insulin sensitivity, which can be a sign, of course, of metabolic health. So again, that was a small research study, but the concept's kind of neat in the fact that again, these really short bursts of a little bit higher intensity exercise, you can even sprinkle those in to make things more time effective here. There's several interesting kind of studies or articles linked on this slide as well that you can access from your documents today if you want to read more. Many people rely on social support and accountability to be physically active. So this could be something that, is a barrier for you or effectively kind of helps you stay physically active here. So even the people that we spend our time with or different environments can either support or hinder our efforts here. So you might want to think about how you get support and social connection for fitness, for exercise. If social support is something that is important to you or the lack of it does hinder your physical activity efforts, here's some potential solutions. And in a way, some of these solutions could also be workarounds for this challenge time barriers. So often, I think of myself, right? Busy parents here, where we state time as a factor all the time, right? you know, that kind of gets in the way. There's never enough time in the day, but doing something maybe with family fitness can be a workaround for that, and something that I use a lot of times here. So going on a hike or going out in the backyard and playing some games together or practicing sports together. These are ways that I can fit in physical activity. And I find a lot of social and fun enjoyment out of that, being able to spend time with my family. Pets can be a good social support too. They can keep us accountable for going on walks or going to the local dog park. And then also social support. This is where a lot of people find enjoyment out of going to exercise classes, because you meet people or you connect with others who have similar goals or similar interests as you. There are certainly times where physical barriers such as illness or injury can cause us to want to pause, step away from exercise. That is as life. If it comes up for you as a barrier, you might just kind of want to assess your needs, right? Is physical activity safe for you at that time? Or do you just need to sort of rest and recover? You can anticipate when you can return to your exercise routine, and even come up with a plan to help you get there in your recovery, or a plan for when you are able to start again. What is that going to look like? What will that consist of at this point? So the barriers of physical kind of issues might cause us to redefine our goals a little bit. Oftentimes, unless it is unsafe to exercise, if we stop our exercise or activity altogether, it can make those physical barriers maybe worse, or of course set us up for a risk of future physical challenges here. So thinking about kind of some workarounds with that, maybe doing therapy exercises or coming up with a plan for when you're not feeling the greatest, for low exercise, or even what we might consider is maintenance, right? We're not working towards a particular goal or outcome, but we're just kind of moving in a low way to kind of keep our activity up. And then outside of physical barriers, right? There's mental and emotional ones too that can get in the way. So if you've ever said, I just don't have time for, or I don't have energy for exercise today. I know I've said that. It could be a physical energy, but it could be a mental energy too. After, a long kind of day, right? Our mental energy might be low, and that really makes it hard for us to find our motivation for physical activity. So kind of considering those barriers as you plan out your exercise. It could also be a confidence thing too. If you're not feeling confident in your skills or knowledge of, again, how to start exercising, or, what else you can do here. Think about what kinds of support or education you maybe need to feel differently. Again, going with someone who is more knowledgeable to exercise, or joining a group class where you don't have to come up with that information. You just kind of follow along here. Hiring somebody to help you, a trainer, a therapist, somebody like that. And then our emotions and efforts, right, can weigh us down too and kind of make things difficult at times. So these are just some mental, kind of emotional solutions here. What you'll notice on some of these is it's a little bit playing into our motivations here, maybe bringing in some pleasantries to help kind of pique our interest or enjoyment, or something that's going to sort of recharge your kind of mental energy surrounding activity. Sometimes just noting how you feel after exercise can help kind of fuel that motivation and help kind of navigate that barrier if it pops up again. You can refer to, what you maybe jotted down in a previous situation. More often than not, nobody goes through an exercise session and completes it and says, man, I wish I never did that. So a lot of times you feel really good about yourself if you are able to work through some barriers or challenges. So having that to refer back to can be a really powerful thing as well. And then last but not least, our other barrier here, right? Because most of us live in Ohio, we have 4 seasons here. We have to navigate all kinds of weather. So especially if exercising outdoors is part of your plan, you're probably going to have to think about solutions to weather barriers at some point. So how are you going to stay active all year round? This is something that we certainly talk a lot about in health coaching with our clients, is navigating those weather barriers to keep going with their physical activity routines and habits. So the next 2 slides here, I just have some kind of tips about exercising outdoors. The first one is in the spring and the summer. The biggest one right now, I think that we're navigating, right, is the heat. So staying hydrated, super important. But also thinking about, I think, time of day. If you plan to be active or exercise, that could kind of factor into your plan. If you normally walk during your lunch hour, you may have to adjust that goal a little bit here to a cooler part of the day. So think about how that's going to impact your plan and when you're able to exercise if you do it outdoors. Or come up with alternatives, right? You may have to be inside. A really great reminder and cost-effective thing is if you're a walker and you can't walk like outside with the heat, humidity, or crazy rain that we've been getting here, look for indoor options. Your local mall, shopping center, before you fill up your grocery cart, do a couple laps around the shopping center. And then lastly, it will be here before we know it, fall and winter. Here's some ideas to keep you going there. It's all about kind of layers, having the right equipment here, maybe even checking when it is appropriate to be outside, or if it is just too cold, and having that plan B option to kind of fall back on here. If any of this feels like you want extra support or accountability as you're going through planning out your exercise program, here's my shameless plug for the health coaching program. We're here to support you in any of these goals that you are working on. If you are OSU faculty and staff and you're benefit eligible, you don't even have to be on the health plan. We're here to kind of give you calls at whatever frequency you desire to kind of check in with you and see how things are going, or to help you kind of navigate some of those barriers and come up with some solutions that you're going to try. If you have any questions about health coaching, you can reach out to me directly, or you can use the email address or phone number listed on the slide here or in your handouts, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. All right, I think that's all I have for you today. If we have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Otherwise, again, I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you so much, Allison. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type those into the question and answer that you see towards the bottom of your screen. We'll hang on for a few minutes just to see if any questions come through. And my colleague Brendan is putting in the link to our evaluation form. Please fill it out for us. We do take the feedback and use it to update our programs and come up with new speakers for future events and programs. So please fill out the evaluation. Allison will get a copy of that, so that way we can give our speakers a chance to make any adjustments or just tell her that she did fantastic. So thank you very much, everyone. We'll hang on for a few minutes just for any questions and answers that come through. Otherwise, have a great afternoon and do something for your health and well-being today. Allison, maybe you might want to drop your email address in case anybody wants to ask you any questions, like personally.
That is a great idea. I will do that.
Okay, I did see one question come through from the question and answers. Allison, any recommendations for someone over 50 years old that should be considered when trying to lose weight?
Yeah, not really anything too much different in terms of exercise. Cardiovascular wise, you may find, right, that you need to do a little bit more for weight loss in the duration of like aerobic exercise. So usually around like 200 kind of minutes per week shows a little bit more significant clinical weight loss. And then the other component of that, I think that's really important for women as we age and managing our weight is the resistance exercise part. So really including in some muscle building exercise will help our metabolism, and then also prevent that kind of muscle loss that we see with aging. So trying to kind of incorporate that in addition to cardiovascular exercise is probably one of the most important recommendations. Oops.
Okay, I do see another question that came in. So Tanya said, great presentation. She wants to give a shout out to Bonnie, her current health coach. She thinks the program is fantastic. And she asked, any other ideas for exercise snacking during the workday?
Yeah, gosh, ideas could probably be endless on that, right? I'm thinking like if you're even at your home or, you know, your office, right? Going up and down the stairs several times, jumping jacks, kind of high knees in place, right? Kind of depends on what your space allows, right? But really the basic idea behind that was, again, really quick, short bouts here, a little bit like higher intensity. So body weight squats, right? You could throw those in, wall push-ups, just any kind of quick bout of activity kind of constitutes a snack. If you want ideas, again, a lot of those articles have some really good links to kind of talk about what kind of the research has shown a little bit on that. I think there was a Blue Zone article that really kind of talked about that research study that I alluded to, and then gave you some ideas or suggestions. So maybe check that one out for sure.